Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing in the blue-black hush outside a noble castle, with cold stone before you, damp straw behind you, smoke caught high in the rafters of the gatehouse, distant bells trembling through river mist, mud clinging to your boots, torchlight crawling over wet walls, and the pale breath of horses drifting like little ghosts in the winter air. The road has been unkind, as medieval roads usually are, because medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You can feel the ache in your legs, the chill in your fingers, and the sour smell of old wool rising from your cloak, and you understand, very gently, that you probably would not last a week out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the guards decide whether you look harmless enough to enter, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what the local time is where you live. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gate above you groans as if it has been asked to wake from a long and private dream. Iron hinges complain in a low voice. Somewhere inside, a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. You stand with other late arrivals beneath the shadow of the outer wall, all of you made equal for a moment by wet hems, numb toes, and the faint hope of supper. Beside you, a carter mutters over a broken wheel bound with rope and prayer. He has tied a sprig of rowan to the axle. For some swear the rowan keeps mischief from biting into wood and bone, though no one can quite agree whether it works better on wheels, witches, or stubborn donkeys. The castle rises from a low hill above the river, its towers dark against a sky the colour of pewter. The moat below is not a shining ribbon from a minstrel's tale, but a sluggish, cold ditch smelling of reeds, mud, and things best left unnamed. A narrow bridge carries carts and guests toward the gate, and every wheel leaves a slick black trail. The stone walls sweat with evening damp. Moss grows between blocks where summer rain has lingered, and old banners hang limp above the entrance, their embroidered beasts looking less fierce after a day of drizzle. Even noble lions, you notice, become humble when soaked. A watchman lowers his lantern and looks you over. His cap is pulled down to his brows, and his beard is silvered with mist. At his belt hangs an iron key large enough to unlock either a door or a small argument. He asks your business, though his voice has the flat weariness of a man who has asked this question since noon. You tell him you have come with the kitchen carriers, then nod toward the baskets behind you, where loaves are stacked under cloth, and a bundle of herbs perfumes the damp air with sage, parsley, and bruised thyme. The watchman sniffs, decides bread is less suspicious than most travellers, and waves you on. You pass beneath the gatehouse, and the world narrows into stone, echo, and smoke. Above, in the murder holes, cold darkness waits. Below, your boots scrape over straw scattered to soak the worst of the muck. A boy with a broom pushes dirty rushes toward the wall. But he does so slowly, because every boy with a broom in any century understands the ancient art of appearing busy without inviting more work. Beyond him, a little shrine rests in a niche candle before a painted saint, a few bent pins left as offerings, and a pilgrim badge in the shape of a scallop shell. The flame gutters as you pass, and one woman crosses herself, whispering that saints are most attentive when their candles nearly go out. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she believes this fully, or simply prefers not to risk discourtesy. Inside the outer ward, the castle breathes with preparation. Stable doors stand open. Horses stamp in straw, their flanks steaming after hard rides through the wet fields. A groom rubs one down with a handful of hay, his fingers red from cold, while another lifts a hoof and checks for stones. The smell is strong and living horse sweat, leather, damp hay, iron shoes, and the sharp tang of dung frozen at the edges. Near the well, maids haul buckets with sleeves rolled above the wrist. Their arms pale in the torchlight, water slaps against wood. A kitchen boy runs past carrying onions in his apron, loses 3, curses under his breath, remembers where he is, and turns the curse into a cough. Everywhere there is motion, yet it moves with the slow rhythm of a household trained by long habit. Men carry firewood stacked against their shoulders. Women hurry with folded cloths, pewter basins, and bundles of clean rushes for the great hall floor. The old rushes, crushed by boots and dogs and dripping cloaks, are being dragged away in sour heaps. It is said in some houses that sweet herbs mixed into fresh rushes can discourage fleas, melancholy, and uninvited spirits. No one can quite agree whether lavender does much against any of these, but it smells better than the alternative, which in a castle is often victory enough. You follow the bread baskets across the ward toward the inner bailey. Ahead, the keep lifts higher, its narrow windows glowing gold. From somewhere within comes a deep, muffled roar, not of battle, but of kitchens at war with hunger. The noble household is holding one of its great feasts tonight, a supper said to stretch through 6 full hours, from the first washing of hands to the last sweet sip of spiced wine. You have heard of such things on market roads and in alehouses, where stories grow taller by the fire. Some swear that lords eat swans in silver sauce and peacocks wearing their feathers again. Others say half the splendour is theatre, and the other half is indigestion dressed in velvet. Still, the castle seems ready to believe in its own grandeur. Torches snap along the walls. Servants hurry between doorways carrying knives, jugs, napery, and covered dishes whose smells escape in warm little sighs. At the chapel door, a clerk with ink-stained fingers consults a wax tablet and frowns, perhaps deciding whether a minor cousin sits above a wealthy knight or below an elderly aunt with dangerous opinions. Seating in noble halls is not simply seating. It is a map of pride, birth, favour, insult, memory, and revenge. A person may forgive a bad stew, given time and ale, but a seat too far from the salt may be remembered until Judgment Day. The bells of a monastery beyond the river begin to ring for evening prayer. Their sound drifts over the walls, softened by mist, and for a moment even the busy yard seems to listen. You pause near a stack of barrels, warming your hands around your own breath. The sound reminds you that beyond these walls, monks are filing into choir stalls, villagers are closing shutters, shepherds are counting beasts. And somewhere on the road a lonely traveller is wondering whether that puddle is shallow or merely ambitious. The world is settling toward night, yet here, inside the castle, night is being delayed by candle, appetite, and rank. A hound appears beside you without introduction. It is lean, brown, and confident, with one torn ear and the expression of a creature who has never paid market tolls in its life. It sniffs your boot, decides you're not food, then follows anyway. You step through a second archway into the inner yard, where the stones are cleaner and the torches brighter. A page in a fur-lined cloak runs past, cheeks flushed, carrying a covered silver cup as carefully as if it contains a saint's relic. Perhaps it does. Noble houses are fond of relics, and some swear that a bone from a holy finger can protect a feast from poison, sour wine, and awkward conversation. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which danger is greatest. At last you near the kitchen passage, where heat spills through the doorway like a living thing. The cold lifts from your face. Smoke curls low, fragrant with roasting meat, onions, ale, and fat dripping into flame. You hear the clatter of pots, the slap of dough, the barked orders of cooks, and the steady turn of a spit. Behind you, the gatehouse fades into damp shadow. Before you, the feast waits, not yet begun, but already filling the castle with its promised 6 hours of bread and ceremony. Hunger and display, soft candlelight on knives, and the long, slow theatre of nobility pretending that eating for half the night is a sign of civilization. You take one last look back across the yard. The broken cartwheel leans near the wall. The suspicious hound settles at your heel. The bells beyond the river fall quiet. Then you duck beneath the low kitchen arch, carrying the road's mud with you into the golden heat. The kitchen receives you as if you have stepped into the belly of some enormous, smoky beast. Heat rolls over your cheeks, your damp cloak sighs, and the mud on your boots begins to soften again. Above you, soot-black rafters vanish into a haze of smoke, where hooks, drying herbs, and strings of onions hang like strange household charms. The air is thick with roasting fat, wet wool, chopped leeks, sharp vinegar, and the sweet green bite of parsley crushed beneath hurried hands. After the cold yard, it almost feels heavenly, though heaven, one hopes, has fewer turnips and less shouting. You keep close to the wall with the bread baskets, because the middle of the kitchen belongs to people who know exactly where they're going, and have no patience for those who do not. A cook with sleeves rolled to the elbows strides past carrying a knife broad enough to settle a family dispute. Another servant bends over a tub, scrubbing wooden trenches with sand, hot water, and grim determination. Trenches are not plates in the graceful sense, but thick slabs of old bread, cut broad and flat to carry meat and sauce. The finer guests will use them briefly, stain them richly, and leave them for servants, beggars, dogs, or pigs, depending on the house's generosity and the dog's speed. Near the hearth, 3 boys turn a long iron spit. The meat rotates slowly before the flames, shining as fat melts and falls with little hisses into the fire. Each hiss sends up a fragrant puff of smoke. One boy's face is red as a winter apple, and his eyes drift towards sleep each time the cook looks away. The smallest keeps count under his breath, though no one can quite agree whether he is counting turns, prayers, or minutes until he may steal a crust. Some kitchens believe that a spit turned unevenly invites bad luck, sour tempers, or meat tough as a tax collector's heart. Others believe it simply annoys the cook, which is a more immediate danger. You set down the bread beneath a long table dusted with flour. Hands reach past you at once. Loaves are sorted by size, hardness, and dignity. The finest white bread is covered and carried toward the hall for noble mouths. Darker loaves, coarse with rye and maslin, remain for lower tables and working hands. A woman with a linen cap presses her thumb into one loaf, nods at its spring, then mutters that the baker has not cheated too badly today. That, in a medieval kitchen, is nearly a hymn of praise. At the far end of the room, sauce is being made in heavy pots. A servant grinds herbs in a mortar, moving the pestle in slow circles sage, hyssop, parsley, a little mustard seed, and something dried and bitter that makes your nose wrinkle. Another pours in vinegar and ale, while a third watches as if the pot may attempt escape. Sauces must be sharp, sweet, spiced, and impressive, because noble tables do not merely feed hunger. They announce distance from ordinary hunger. A peasant may eat pottage and be grateful. A lord must have pottage improved by almonds, coloured with saffron, named with confidence, and served as though angels argued over the recipe. A small dish of salt sits near the cook's station, protected from careless elbows. Salt is precious, More than a seasoning, almost a boundary. People speak of sitting above or below the salt in the hall, and the phrase carries more weight than the salt itself. Here in the kitchen, it is guarded like a relic. One scullion reaches too near, and the cook snaps his name without even turning around. The boy withdraws his hand quickly, as if from a sleeping snake. By the doorway, an old woman ties a red thread around the handle of a ladle. You watch her fingers move, knotted and quick. She sees your glance and smiles with only half her mouth. Some swear that red thread keeps envy from entering the pot, especially on feast nights when too many proud stomachs gather under one roof. No one can quite agree whether envy spoils broth, curdles cream, or merely makes servants quarrel, but the thread remains. Nearby, a sprig of rosemary has been tucked above the lintel, and a horseshoe blackened by age hangs with its open end up, holding whatever luck has not yet leaked away. The suspicious hound from the yard slips in behind you, silent as a bad thought. It lowers its nose to the rushes, follows a trail of crumbs, and settles beneath a bench with the practised innocence of a creature who has attended many feasts without invitation. A kitchen maid spots it and points with the spoon. "Out," she says. The hound blinks. There is a pause in which both parties consider law, custom, and appetite. Then she drops a bit of gristle near the door, and the hound relocates exactly as far as necessary to claim diplomatic victory. Beyond the main hearth, smaller fires burn under cauldrons of pottage. The surface bubbles slowly, thick with peas, onions, herbs, and scraps of smoked meat. Steam beads on the faces of those who lean over it. A man stirs with a paddle nearly as tall as himself, and his shoulders move in a tired rhythm. Pottage is the old faithful of the medieval world, present in huts, monasteries, manor houses, and castles alike. It can be thin enough to drink or thick enough to stand a spoon in, depending on season, purse, and optimism. Tonight, because noble guests are expected, even the pottage seems proud of itself. You move along the wall, careful not to trip over stacked firewood, baskets of apples, and a sleeping cat curled on a sack of oats. The cat opens one eye, judges you, and returns to its ancient work of contempt. Near the buttery door, servants fill jugs with ale. Barrels stand in a row, marked in chalk. Ale is safer than much water, or so people say with the confidence of those who have never seen the inside of a barrel too closely. The drink smells yeasty and sour sweet. A boy wipes foam from his wrist and licks it before anyone can scold him. He's scolded anyway because kitchens run on heat, labour, and the belief that boys are always doing something wrong. A clerk from the hall enters holding a wax tablet. His robe is clean, which immediately makes him suspicious in this room. Ink stains mark 2 fingers, and his lips move as he counts dishes under his breath. He asks whether the first roasted birds are near ready, whether the fish has been sauced, whether the wafers are dry, whether the Lord's table has enough white bread, whether the peacock is truly prepared. At the word peacock, a few servants exchange glances. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether a bird dressed again in its own feathers is a marvel, a joke, or an insult to common sense. The cook only grunts and points him away from the hearth before his robe becomes less clean. You glimpse the bird then, half hidden on a side table beneath cloth. Its long feathers lie nearby, carefully saved, their eyes dark and shimmering in the candlelight. For now it is not yet spectacle, only work-roasted flesh, cooling skin, pins, thread, and the quiet craft of making food look like legend. The sight feels strange, almost dreamlike, but the woman beside it has flour on her cheek and a knife between her teeth, which restores the world to practical matters. The bells beyond the river sound again, faint through stone and smoke, In the kitchen, no one pauses this time. Prayer may mark the hours, but supper has its own liturgy. Wood is fed to flame. Knives rise and fall. Bread is carried out. More rushes are brought for the hall. The half-burned candles from earlier are trimmed and set aside, because wax costs money, and even nobles prefer their splendour reused when no guest is looking. You warm your hands near the edge of the hearth, not close enough to be accused of idling, but close enough to feel life returning to your fingers. The cook shouts for more platters. Someone laughs softly. Somewhere behind a screen, a pot lid clatters like a dropped shield. The 6-hour feast has still not begun, yet already it has consumed the strength of half the household. You understand, standing in the golden smoke glow, that noble glory is not born in the hall, it begins here in sweat. Soot, red thread, scrubbed trenchers, aching backs, and the long patience of people who will eat last. Then a horn sounds from beyond the passage, low and formal. The kitchen tightens. Servants lift dishes. The cook wipes his hands on his apron and looks toward the hall. You gather yourself, and the hound raises its head, as if even it knows the first movement of the feast is drawing near. You follow the first line of servants out of the kitchen heat and into the passage, where the air cools so suddenly that your face feels rinsed in shadow. Behind you, the hearth roars on, but ahead the castle gathers itself into ceremony. The narrow corridor bends beneath low beams blackened by generations of smoke. Your shoulder brushes cold plaster. Your boots whisper over old rushes pressed flat by hundreds of hurried feet. Somewhere in the wall, water drips with the patient confidence of a thing that has no respect for architecture. The great hall waits beyond an oak door banded in iron. 2 men push it open, and candlelight spills toward you in a broad amber sheet. You step inside with the others and feel the size of the room rise above you, high rafters lost in soot, banners hanging stiffly in the warmth, shields catching little sparks of light, and long tables stretching over the stone floor like dark boats ready to carry the household through the night. At the far end, upon a low dais, the high table stands beneath a canopy, brighter than the rest, as if rank itself gives off a glow. Fresh rushes are being scattered over the floor. A pair of maids move steadily across the stones, shaking bundles from their aprons. The rushes fall with a dry whisper, pale green and gold, mixed with sweet herbs, lavender, meadow sweet, rosemary, and perhaps a little tansy to discourage fleas, evil airs, and whatever else might be bold enough to attend supper without invitation. No one can quite agree whether these herbs truly cleanse the hall, or whether they simply make everyone feel more civilized while standing on old damp stone. Either way, the smell is gentler than the yard, and that is a form of mercy. You help carry in a final bundle and spread it near the lower benches, where the servants, poorer guests, retainers, and useful people will eventually crowd shoulder to shoulder. Under the fresh layer, you can still sense the older floor beneath ash, spilled ale, dog hair, crumbs, and the memory of previous meals. A castle hall is never completely clean. It merely changes costume. Tonight, it dresses itself in rushes and candlelight and hopes no one asks too many questions. The beeswax candles are lit next. This is no small thing. Tallow candles, made from animal fat, smoke and stink and belong to humbler corners of the world, but beeswax burns sweeter and steadier, with a faint honeyed breath that makes the air feel almost holy. A steward watches as servants set them in iron prickets and brass holders along the high table. He counts them with narrowed eyes, because beeswax is costly, and a careless flame is either waste, danger, or both. One candle leans crookedly. He corrects it as though straightening the spine of the kingdom. Shadows begin to move over the walls. The banners stir slightly in the draughts that creep through shutters and under doors. You see painted beasts above you, lions, boars, falcons, a blue fish with an expression of mild legal concern. Some swear noble families choose such creatures for courage, wisdom, or ancient victories, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether anyone truly remembers the victories, or whether a great-grandfather simply liked the look of a dramatic animal. Still, beneath the candlelight, even a doubtful fish seems important. Now comes the delicate labour of placement. The hall fills not by accident, but by invisible measurement. Benches are shifted, cushions are placed on the dais, salt cellars are set down, one grand silver salt near the high table and smaller bowls farther along. To sit above the salt is to be honoured. To sit below it is to be reminded gently, publicly, and for several hours, that heaven may love all souls equally, but supper does not. A clerk with ink-stained fingers stands near the steward, reading names from a folded list. His lips are tight. This is dangerous work. A man may survive bad weather, bad ale, and a suspicious horse, but seat him too low at dinner and you may create a family grudge with grandchildren. You watch guests begin to enter from the side doors and screen passage. First come household knights in wool cloaks lined with fur, their boots cleaned but never entirely innocent. Then minor nobles, cousins, widowed aunts, visiting squires, a priest with careful hands, and two merchants whose belts are rich enough to make old blood uncomfortable. The merchants bow deeply, smiling in the particular way of men who know their money has arrived before their manners. A lady in a dark green gown pauses near the rushes and lifts her hem just enough to save it from damp. Her sleeves are trimmed with fur, and at her wrist hangs a little charm shaped like a closed hand. Some swear such charms guard against envy and the evil eye, especially at feasts where everyone is looking at everyone else's jewels. The steward guides each guest with soft firmness, this one higher, that one lower. A knight with a scarred cheek is moved 2 places down and accepts it with a smile that could chill porridge. An elderly woman is given a cushion and the courtesy of sitting near the warmth. Perhaps because she is respected, perhaps because she has outlived every person foolish enough to argue with her. Even now, it is hard to tell whether rank in the hall follows law, blood, wealth, age, favour, or the steward's private fear of complaints, likely all at once. You keep near the lower end, where you're permitted to be useful and mostly invisible. The brown hound pads in after you as if invited by royal seal. It sniffs the fresh rushes, turns twice, and settles below a bench with a sigh of deep ownership. A page tries to shoo it away, but the hound closes its eyes. There is a wisdom in that. Many disputes can be postponed by pretending to sleep. Along the walls, servants place ewers, basins, folded towels, and jugs of ale. The washing of hands will come soon, because noble eating is a ceremony of fingers, knives, bread, and reputation. Few people own forks here, and those who do may be considered either elegant or dangerously foreign, depending on who is speaking. For most, fingers will do the work, and clean fingers matter. A basin of scented water waits near the high table, floating with herbs. The water catches the candlelight and trembles each time someone passes. The hall grows warmer as bodies gather. Damp wool begins to steam faintly. Fur, leather, beeswax, fresh rushes, and the far-off promise of roasted meat mingle into one thick medieval breath. A minstrel tunes quietly near the hearth, plucking a string, then tightening it, then plucking again with the patient sadness of a man trying to make winter sound expensive. A monk in a dark cloak takes a place near the side, watching the hall with solemn eyes. You remember the doubtful relic at the gatehouse shrine and wonder if he has brought one of his own. Some monks travel with little bones, bits of cloth, or splinters said to be holy. No one can quite agree whether all such relics are genuine, though everyone agrees it is unwise to mock them before supper. At last the Lord enters, and the hall lowers itself into order. Voices soften, heads bend. He comes beneath the banners in a fur-lined mantle, not rushing, because rank never hurries unless the roof is on fire. Beside him walks the lady of the house, her keys hanging from her girdle, bright iron symbols of storerooms, chests, linens, spices, and quiet authority. Those keys may weigh less than a sword, but every servant in the hall knows their power. You stand still among the rushes as the candles burn higher. The feast has not yet touched a tongue, yet already it has arranged the world high and low, warm and cold, honoured and overlooked, scented water and muddy boots, silver salt and wooden bowls. Outside, the monastery bells fade into the mist. Inside, the great hall waits, shining and watchful, while the first basin is lifted and carried toward the dais. The basin moves first, slow and bright, as if water itself has been promoted for the evening. A servant carries it in both hands, while another follows with a folded towel over one arm and a small ewer of warmed water in the other. Steam rises faintly from the basin, scented with rosemary and perhaps a little lavender, though no one can quite agree whether the herbs truly cleanse the hands or merely remind noble guests that they are expected to behave as if cleansed. You watch the Lord extend his fingers above the silver rim. Water is poured. It slips over rings, knuckles, old scars, and clean nails, then falls into the bowl with a soft, private sound. The lady washes next, her keys glinting at her girdle. Then the honoured guests, in careful order, each receiving water according to rank. It is a small act, yet the hall treats it with deep attention. Here, eating is not simply eating. It is a public proof that everyone knows where they stand, how to move, when to speak, and how not to drip on velvet. Down near your place, a wooden basin is passed with less ceremony and more splashing. You rinse your own cold fingers quickly, rubbing at the dirt near your nails, and dry them on a towel that has already served several people and looks spiritually tired. A chaplain steps forward, his face pale in the candlelight. He lifts his hand, and the hall quiets until you can hear the fire settling in the hearth and the brown hound breathing beneath the bench. The prayer is brief, though not so brief that hungry men do not notice its length. He asks blessing over bread, ale, household, guests, and all Christian souls. A few mouths move with him, a few eyes drift toward the kitchen passage. You bow your head and smell warm wax, damp rushes, and the faint sweetness of the water still clinging to your hands. Some swear a meal begun without prayer sits badly in the belly, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this is divine displeasure or simply poor cooking finding a useful disguise. When the prayer ends, the hall exhales, ale comes next. The jugs arrive in rows, carried by boys and women with steady arms. The first cups go to the dais, polished vessels for the lord and lady, better wooden cups for honoured guests, rougher mugs and shared bowls farther down. Ale foams at the lip, brown and cloudy, smelling of grain, yeast, and the cool dark of barrels. You receive a cup that is not quite clean but is at least familiar with water. The first swallow warms your throat and settles into your stomach with a dull comfort. It is weak enough for long drinking, sour enough to remind you of life's limits, and safer than many wells along the road. Medieval wisdom, you're learning, often means choosing the danger that tastes better. The bread is cut with equal care. At the high table, white loaves are sliced open, their pale crumbs soft beneath a sharp knife. Down below, coarser bread is broken and shared, darker, heavier, and honest in the hand. Servants place trenchers before the guests, thick slabs of stale bread trimmed square to catch meat juices and sauces. You set one before yourself and press your fingertips into it. It is firm, almost stern. By the end of the night, if fortune is kind, it will be soaked with enough richness to make a beggar bless it, a dog steal it, or a servant hide it under a cloth with the speed of a military campaign. The steward walks the length of the hall, watching everything. He notices who drinks too quickly, who leans too far across the table, who receives a cup before someone of greater name, and who pretends not to notice. His face is calm, but his eyes are busy as mice in a granary. You understand that a feast of 6 hours must be governed like a small kingdom. Without order, ale becomes argument. Argument becomes insult. Insult becomes family history. And family history has a terrible habit of lasting longer than anyone's teeth. Near the salt, 2 knights exchange cautious glances over their cups. One has been placed slightly below the other. The difference is no more than a hand's breadth along the table, yet it lies between them like a ditch filled with winter water. The higher knight smiles gently. The lower knight smiles back with equal gentleness, which somehow feels worse. Across from you, a merchant watches the exchange and decides to admire his bread instead. This is wise. A man who's paid market tolls in 3 towns knows when not to purchase trouble. A page moves past with a small dish of salt and places it near your table's better end. People reach for it with respect. Salt is pinched, not grabbed. Spilled salt draws little signs in the air, quick gestures of protection. Some swear that if salt falls, a devil waits over the left shoulder to enjoy the waist, and so a pinch must be tossed back to blind him. No one can quite agree how many devils attend a noble feast, but given the amount of pride in the room, there is probably standing room only. You drink again and let the hall settle around you. The first sharp hunger softens into anticipation. Wood cracks in the hearth. The minstrel near the wall plucks a low, slow tune that curls beneath the conversation rather than rising above it. The sound is simple, almost sleepy, and it mingles with the scrape of benches, the murmur of servants, and the faint clink of rings against cups. A draught slips under the door and lifts the candle flame sideways. The beeswax bends but does not fail. The Lord speaks to the guests at his table, and laughter spreads from the dais in careful waves. Those closest laugh first and fullest. Those farther down wait half a breath, listening for whether the sound is truly welcome. Then they join, each according to rank and confidence. You smile into your cup. Noble laughter, you decide, has seating arrangements too. A servant brings small knives to those who need them. Many guests carry their own, hanging at the belt, because a person in this world travels with the knife as naturally as with the shadow. You notice the blades being wiped on cloth, sleeves, or bread, depending on manners. The chaplain pretends not to see one man clean his knife on the underside of the table. The brown hound sees everything, especially crumbs. Time stretches. It has only begun. Yet already the feast teaches patience. 6 hours is not a meal, but a long road laid across the night. There will be courses, music, pauses, boasting, more washing, more ale, and moments when even the proudest stomach quietly asks whether glory might take a rest. For now, you sit in the candle-lit order of the hall, hands clean enough, cup warm from your grip, trencher waiting before you like a small edible plate of destiny. From the kitchen passage comes the first deeper stir boots moving in rhythm, platters lifted, a cook's voice carrying sharp through the door. The smell arrives before the food, rich and smoky, winding over the rushes and under the tables. Heads turn, though politely, because hunger must also know its manners. You lower your cup. Around you, the hall gathers itself, and the first course begins its slow journey toward the light. The first course enters not all at once, but in a slow procession of warmth. The kitchen passage glows behind the servants, and from it comes a rolling cloud of steam that slips into the hall before any platter appears, carrying with it the smells of onions, herbs, browned skin, smoked fish, and bread grown soft beneath rising heat. Conversation lowers, not because anyone commands silence, but because hunger has its own authority. Even the knight, still nursing his wound of seating pride, turns his attention toward the doorway, as if dignity may be postponed until after pottage. A pair of servants brings the great pot first, suspended between them on an iron rod. It is heavy enough to make their shoulders bow. The pottage inside stirs thickly, green-brown and gold in the candlelight, with peas, leeks, barley, herbs, and shreds of smoked meat rising and sinking like little fortunes. Bowls are filled near the side table and carried down the hall in order. Finest first, roughest last, though the smell belongs generously to everyone. When your portion reaches you, it steams against your face. You lean over it, and the damp chill of the road seems, for a moment, like something that happened to someone else. You taste carefully, because medieval spoons are honest tools but not always gentle ones, and because the pottage is hot enough to punish greed. It is thick, earthy, salted just enough, and sharpened with herbs from the kitchen mortar. A little barley clings to the wooden spoon. A thread of leek rests on your lip until you remove it with what you hope is quiet grace. Across the table, a young squire burns his mouth and tries to hide it behind a solemn expression. He fails. His eyes water heroically. The merchant beside him looks away, offering the rare mercy of pretending not to witness a man defeated by soup. Bread follows, passed hand to hand, white loaves drifting toward the dais like pale clouds, darker trenchers and coarse pieces settling among the lower tables. You break a chunk and dip it into the pottage. The bread softens at once, taking in broth, fat, and onion. This is the kind of food that holds a person together through cold mornings, muddy roads, and days when the world seems made mostly of taxes. You understand why even a noble feast begins here, with humble warmth. Before the shining dishes and proud birds, before the sugar and spiced wine, there's still the old comfort of grain, salt, and fire. Then come the smoked fish, laid out on broad wooden boards, their skins dark and shining, their flesh flaking beneath knives. Some are river fish from nearby waters, others carried salted from farther markets, stiff with preservation and revived by sauce. A servant spoons mustard and vinegar over them, and the sharp smell pricks your nose. In winter, fish is practical, holy, and stubbornly present. Fast days, feast days, saints' days. Market days' fish seems to swim through the calendar whether anyone invites it or not. Some swear that eating fish on certain holy evenings keeps misfortune from the door, though no one can quite agree whether misfortune is frightened by fish or simply bored by it. You place a small piece on your trencher. The bread drinks the oil and vinegar. The taste is smoky, salty, and bright enough to wake the tongue from pottage's soft heaviness. The brown hound beneath the bench lifts its head at once. Its nose appears near your knee, damp and hopeful, with the confidence of a pilgrim who has discovered a shrine made entirely of bones. You do not feed it. not immediately. It watches you as though writing your moral history, at last. When a flake slips from your fingers, the hound catches it before it touches the rushes. A page sees this and frowns, but the hound has already returned to innocence. At the high table, roasted birds are carved with more ceremony. Chickens, capons, and small game birds lie on platters dressed with herbs, their skins crisped by the hearth, their juices shining in candlelight. Servants carry portions outward according to rank, and you notice how the best pieces travel only so far before vanishing. Down at your end, the meat is darker, smaller, but still rich enough to make conversation pause. A man near you murmurs thanks under his breath before eating. Another makes a tiny sign over his food, perhaps piety, perhaps habit, perhaps suspicion. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people fear poison more than bad luck, or bad luck more than undercooked poultry. Manners unfold in small, watchful movements. Fingers are used, but not all fingers at once. Knives cut, bread catches, sleeves are guarded from sauce, and bones are placed aside without flinging, unless one is very young, very drunk, or raised among wolves with poor instruction. You learn by watching. You tear meat gently. You keep your elbows close. You do not reach across a neighbour's cup. You wipe your fingers on bread before using the shared salt. This last point matters. A woman across from you gives a sharp look to a man who forgets, and the look alone could curdle milk. Music begins again near the hearth, soft beneath the clatter. The minstrel plays a slow tune, while a second voice joins in a song about spring fields, absent lovers, and a horse that knows the way home better than its rider. The song drifts through the hall like warm smoke. Servants move in and out of it, carrying bowls, bones, empty jugs, and fresh ale. Their faces shine with heat. Their steps are quick but practiced. One girl balances 3 bowls along her arm and never spills a drop. This, you decide, is a greater miracle than half the relics in roadside shrines, though you wisely do not say so near the suspicious monk. The monk sits along the wall, eating little, watching much. His hands are clean, his eyes deep set, and a small pouch hangs at his belt. Perhaps it holds a relic, perhaps writing tools, perhaps dried plums for private comfort. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about monks at noble feasts. Some say they come to bless the table. Some say they come to remind the powerful of heaven. Others say they come because noble kitchens are warmer than cloisters and the ale is better, which feels like an argument with sturdy legs. The first course lengthens, bowls empty, cups refill, trenchers darken with broth and fish oil. The rushes beneath the benches gather crumbs. Candle flames bend in the draughts, then stand straight again. On the dais, laughter rises, spreads, and fades. At your table, people grow easier. The squire's burned mouth is forgotten. The merchant risks a small joke about toll collectors, and 3 men laugh because it is safe to dislike toll collectors in almost any company. For a little while. Rank loosens, not vanishing, never that but softening under the shared labour of chewing. Yet the feast is only beginning. The first course settles into your belly like a warm stone. You feel comfort, and also the faint warning that 6 hours is a long time to remain grateful. Around you, servants clear bowls and lift stained trenchers from those who require fresh ones. The hound noses hopefully at the floor, the half-burned candles near the lower wall gutter and recover. From the kitchen passage, deeper smells begin to gather again, stranger and richer than before. But they remain hidden for now, waiting behind the screen while the hall breathes, drinks, and prepares itself for the long middle of the night. The first course leaves behind a softer kind of noise, not silence, not exactly, but the hall lowers into that comfortable murmur which comes when hunger has been answered just enough to become patient. Bowls are carried away, fresh cups are poured, knives are wiped, trenchers are shifted, crumbs are brushed into palms, and the great room seems to breathe through its rafters, slow and smoky, as if the castle itself has taken a swallow of ale and settled in for the long work ahead. You lean back a little on the bench, careful not to lean so far that you invite either sleep or judgment. The rushes beneath your boots are already losing their fresh sweetness, taking on the deeper scent of spilled broth, wet wool, ash, and dogs. Somewhere under the table, the brown hound sighs with theatrical sadness, having received less fish than it believes justice requires. Its torn ear twitches each time a servant passes. You suspect it has survived a more noble feast than many noble guests, and with better manners. Beyond the shuttered windows, the monastery bells begin again. Their sound arrives faintly through wall, mist, and winter dark. Each note softened until it seems less rung than remembered. You hear them mark the hour somewhere across the river, where monks stand in their cold choir stalls with hoods drawn close, singing while their breath clouds in the candlelight. Here in the hall, no one rises for prayer, but several faces turn slightly, almost without meaning to. Bells belong to everyone in this world. They tell monks when to chant, bakers when to rise, labourers when to leave the fields, and hungry guests when they've been eating longer than they care to admit. A servant near you mutters that bells heard during supper keep evil spirits outside the walls. Another answers that if bells truly worked that well, manor courts would be much quieter. No one can quite agree whether bells frighten demons, storms, wolves, or only sleeping villagers. But their sound still lays a thin silver thread through the smoky hall. You listen until the final note fades, and the murmur of the feast rolls gently back over it. This is the in-between hour, the hour of waiting, when the first heat of food sinks into the body and the next wonders are not yet ready to appear. The hall is neither hungry nor satisfied. It is suspended. The Lord speaks softly with a grey-haired knight near the salt. The lady of the house bends her head toward an older woman in a veil, listening with the expression of someone receiving either family news or a very complicated complaint. At the lower tables, people stretch their fingers toward cups, crack joints, shift damp boots, and begin to trust the night a little more. Near the hearth, the entertainers take their place more fully. The minstrel who played earlier now sits on a low stool, tuning a small harp by candlelight. Beside him, a thin man with clever eyes arranges little wooden cups for a trick, while a younger singer warms her hands over the fire before lifting her voice. The song she begins is not loud. It moves softly, a tale of a pilgrim lost on a forest road, guided by a saint disguised as a poor old woman. Some swear such saints still walk the roads in ragged cloaks, testing whether strangers share bread. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the saint rewards kindness with miracles, directions, or simply the absence of misfortune, which on a muddy road may be miracle enough. You watch the fire catch the edges of the singer's face. Her voice is clear but low, woven into the clink of cups and the scrape of benches. The thin man performs his cup trick for a cluster of pages, hiding a pebble beneath one cup and making it appear beneath another. The pages stare as if witnessing forbidden learning. One declares it sorcery. The performer bows solemnly and says the sorcery is mostly practice, which disappoints everyone. Along the side passage, servants move in deeper shadow. They carry empty platters back toward the kitchen and return with folded cloths, fresh knives, bowls of scented water, and covered dishes not yet meant for the hall. You glimpse only edges a flash of glazed pastry, a dish coloured yellow with saffron, small birds arranged in a pattern, something dark and shining beneath sauce. The stranger preparations stay beyond reach, half hidden behind the screen. This is how a noble feast keeps its spell. It lets hunger see the door but not the room beyond it. You rise for a moment when a servant gestures for help with a heavy jug. Your legs have stiffened from sitting, and the warmth of ale makes the floor seem less certain than before. Together you carry the jug along the lower table, pouring carefully into waiting cups. This is ordinary work. The quiet muscle beneath ceremony lift, pour, step, avoid elbows, avoid dogs, avoid the man who tells stories with both hands. A woman thanks you without looking up. A squire nods as if granting you land. You accept both rewards with equal dignity. At the end of the table, a guest produces a small bundle from inside his sleeve dried fennel seeds, which he chews thoughtfully after the first course. He offers some to his neighbour. Fennel, he claims, settles the stomach, freshens the breath, sharpens the eyes, and discourages ghosts from sitting too close. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval remedies are medicine, prayer, habit, or optimism with a pleasant taste. You take one seed when offered. It cracks between your teeth. Sweet and green, and for a moment the heavy air feels clearer. The suspicious monk watches the exchange. His pouch still hangs at his belt, and his fingers rest over it protectively. He speaks little, but when a servant passes, he asks whether the chapel lamp has been trimmed. The servant nods. The monk seems satisfied, though perhaps only partly. Some swear that during great feast, chapel lamps must never go out, lest the household's luck gutter with them. Others say monks simply dislike unattended flames, which is fair enough in a castle made of wood. Straw, cloth, and confidence. The candles burn lower by a finger's width. Wax softens down their sides. A servant comes with little snuffers, trimming blackened wicks so the flames remain clear. This, too, feels like a ritual, the small keeping of light against smoke and draught. One half-burned candle near the lower wall sputters, recovers, and leans bravely on. You remember seeing candles trimmed in the kitchen, saved because even a noble house does not waste wax when bees and servants have worked hard for it. The hall grows drowsier, but not sleepy. It is the drowsiness of a long road paused at an inn, of horses steaming in stalls, of cloaks drying by uncertain fires. Outside, the world is cold and dark. Inside, the feast holds its golden weather. You hear rain begin faintly against the shutters, or perhaps only melted frost dripping from the roof. No one can quite agree whether winter rain sounds lonelier on stone or on thatch, but here it taps softly behind the music. A patient little reminder that the road remains outside. At last. From the kitchen passage, the motion changes. Servants straighten. The steward lifts his chin. The cook's voice carries once, sharp and low, then disappears beneath the gathering tread of feet. The entertainers let their song fade gently rather than stop. Cups are set down, hands are wiped, the hound opens one eye. You settle back onto the bench as the shadows behind the screen swell with heat, scent, and movement, and the long middle of the feast prepares to reveal what it has been hiding. The first sign is the smell. It rolls out from behind the screen before the servants appear, deeper than pottage, darker than fish, rich with roasted fat, singed herbs, vinegar, smoke, and something wild beneath it all, as if a corner of the winter forest has been persuaded to enter the hall on a platter. People lift their heads. The murmur thins. Even those pretending not to watch the kitchen passage surrender and turn openly toward it. Then the boar comes. 4 servants carry it on a long board, shoulders tight, steps measured, faces shining with heat. The animal's head has been set proudly forward, tusks pale in the candlelight, skin dark and lacquered with sauce. Around it lie roasted apples, onions, rosemary, and little heaps of coarse salt glittering like frost. Someone has tucked a sprig of bay behind one ear, which gives the beast the look of having dressed for court with more confidence than most guests. A low sound passes through the hall. Admiration for a creature strong enough to frighten men in life and impress them in death. At the high table, the Lord smiles. A boar speaks of forests, hunts, hounds, horses, spears, woodland rites, and men who can afford to chase dinner for sport while other people are pleased if their cabbage survives frost. No one can quite agree whether the Lord himself struck this boar. Though, by the way, the story begins forming near the salt, he will certainly have stood very close to someone who did. A grey-haired knight raises his cup and tells how the beast charged through bracken, scattering dogs and boys alike. Another corrects him softly. A third improves the tale by adding a broken spear. The boar, already roasted, cannot defend its version. Servants set the board before the dais. The carver steps forward with a long knife and a narrower blade. Carving is not hacking, it is theatre with sharp edges. He bows first to the Lord, then to the meat, which seems only polite after such a journey. His hands move steadily, separating crisp skin, dark flesh, and tender fat. A bowl waits for sauce, thickened with bread, sharpened with vinegar, and coloured with spices from far roads. At your lower table, you watch the best cuts climb the ladder of rank. Only later, humbled but still fragrant, do smaller pieces reach the rest of you. When a strip of boar lands on your trencher, you lean over it before eating. It is darker than farm pork, richer, with a taste of smoke and woods and old leaves. The sauce sinks into the bread beneath. You chew slowly, feeling the feast deepen inside you. Across the table, the young squire declares it the finest boar in 3 counties, though he has the dreamy expression of someone who would say the same of a hot turnip if praised loudly enough. The merchant beside him nods wisely, perhaps calculating what 3 counties of boar might cost. The brown hound emerges beneath the bench like a rumour. Its nose rises beside your knee. You give it nothing this time, because the hall has too many eyes, and the hound already looks better fed than several pilgrims you have passed on the road. It sighs in a way that suggests betrayal will be remembered. Before the boar's glory has fully settled, another murmur begins near the kitchen passage. Servants return more slowly now, carrying something stranger. A peacock appears beneath the candlelight, arranged upright upon a platter as if still in possession of opinions. Its roasted body has been dressed again in the saved feathers, blues and greens shimmering in the smoky air, the long tail fanned behind it with little metal pins and thread. For a moment the hall becomes very still. The bird is absurd, beautiful, solemn, and faintly accusing. Even now, it's hard to tell whether such a dish honours nature, insults it, or simply proves that noble cooks are dangerous when given enough time. Some swear a peacock served in its feathers shows the magnificence of the house, because the bird itself was once a marvel from far-off lands, kept in gardens for display and complaint. Others say the custom comes from old tales of knights swearing vows over peacock flesh, because the bird was thought noble, watchful, and incorruptible. No one can quite agree whether the peacock truly resists decay, though you suspect any creature left too long in a warm hall would abandon legend for biology. Still, the guests gaze as though a miracle has been placed among the trenchers. The suspicious monk looks at the bird with particular seriousness. Perhaps he disapproves of vanity, perhaps he admires workmanship. Perhaps he's wondering, like you, how many feathers may fall into the sauce before holiness is effected. His hand closes briefly over the pouch at his belt. At the high table, the lady smiles with calm command, watching the room admire what her stores, her servants, and her keys have made possible. a visiting nobleman tells of a feast where peacock was gilded with thin leaves of gold, so bright that men feared to cut it. Another insists he once saw a swan carried in with a silver chain around its neck. A third claims that in the court of a prince far away, pies were opened and living birds flew out singing. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this actually happened, whether the birds sang, or whether everyone simply ducked and called it entertainment afterward. Gold, real or painted, appears even here. A servant carries a dish brushed with saffron yellow glaze, and another brings a sauce shining with costly spice. Gilding food is less about flavour than astonishment. It tells every eye in the hall that wealth can be eaten, admired, wasted, and remembered. You think of the rushes beneath your boots, already bruised and darkening, of the kitchen boys turning spits until their arms tremble, of the half-burned candle near the wall, still doing its small honest work. Splendour rests on ordinary things, though it rarely thanks them aloud. The peacock is carved at last, carefully, almost apologetically. Feathers are lifted away, flesh divided. Portions sent first to the high table. Not much reaches you, only a small piece scented with spices and smoke. But that is enough. The taste is firmer than chicken, less grand than its costume, and all the more human for it. Around you. The hall relaxes into talk again. Cups rise. Knives shine. The rain taps softly beyond the shutters. The monastery bells remain quiet for now, leaving the feast to measure time by courses, candles, and the slow surrender of everyone's appetite. You sit with boar sauce soaking your trencher, peacock smoke fading on your tongue, and the hound pretending forgiveness at your feet. The middle of the feast has shown its proudest face, yet the night is not finished. Beyond the dishes and boasting, another scent begins to thread the air, sweet, sharp, costly, and far-travelled, hinting at roads longer than any you have walked today. The new scent does not arrive like meat, heavy and commanding, but like a secret slipping beneath a door. It threads through the hall in thin, warm lines: cinnamon, cloves, pepper, ginger, and the faint, bright sweetness of sugar. After the boar and peacock, after smoke and salt and roasted fat. These smells seem almost impossible, as if the night has opened a little window onto warmer seas, foreign markets, and sunlit roads beyond the edge of winter. You breathe in slowly. The spices are not loud. They do not fill the belly. They stir the imagination, which is sometimes more dangerous. Around you, guests begin to notice. A woman near the lower table lifts her chin. A merchant smiles before he can stop himself. A knight says, with great confidence, that true pepper should bite the tongue like a small black devil. No one can quite agree whether this is praise or complaint, but he says it twice, so it must be important. Servants carry in small dishes dressed with sauces darker and brighter than anything before. There is meat in a cinnamon sour sauce, thickened with bread and sharpened with vinegar. There are little pieces of roasted fowl dusted with ginger. There is a golden dish coloured with saffron, glowing softly in the candlelight like captured late summer. At the high table, a shallow bowl of sugar is placed near the lady, white and precious, finer than salt and stranger than snow. You have seen frost on fields, flour on hands, ash on hearthstones, but sugar at a noble table looks like winter made wealthy. The merchant near you leans forward, unable to resist explaining. He has travelled, or wants everyone to believe he has travelled, along roads where tolls sit like spiders at every bridge and gate. Pepper, he says, may pass through ports, counting houses, fairs, pack trains, river barges, and the hands of men who never see the fields where it grew. Cinnamon comes rolled like little bark scrolls from lands so far away that even maps become shy. Cloves, he claims, grow on islands beyond islands, where the air itself smells of spice. Some swear that such places are guarded by serpents, monstrous birds, or jealous kings, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the monsters are real or merely useful for raising the price. You take a small bite of meat touched with cinnamon. It is sweet, sour, warm, and strange against the dark taste of boar still lingering on your tongue. The sauce clings to your bread trencher and seeps into it, turning the old crust fragrant. You chew slowly, feeling how a spice can change the whole mood of food, not by filling it but by haunting it. A pinch of pepper has crossed more miles than most people in the hall ever will. It has survived damp ships, suspicious customs men, market tolls, locked chests, and at least one steward who counts everything twice. Now it rests on your tongue for a breath and vanishes. At the mention of tolls, the merchant warms like a coal. He speaks of town gates where every cart must pay, of bridges where officials measure barrels and argue over bundles, of market squares where cloth, salt, iron, wax, and spice are weighed beneath the eyes of men who trust no scale except their own. He tells how a pack horse once slipped in mud near a shrine and spilled a bag of pepper into the road. People gathered black grains from the muck as if collecting fallen stars. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he witnessed this himself or merely purchased the story second-hand, but no one interrupts. A good tale, like a good spice, does not need to be abundant to flavour the room. The suspicious monk finally speaks. He says that pride enters most easily through the mouth. The merchant replies, very gently, that so does hospitality. The table grows quiet for half a breath. Then the monk smiles, thin but real, and accepts a piece of spiced bread from a passing servant. Peace is restored, or at least postponed. This, too, is medieval diplomacy, a little theology, a little trade, and enough sauce to keep both from sharpening. A servant brings a small dish of candied fennel and anise for the higher guests. Seeds coated lightly with sugar to sweeten breath and settle the stomach. Only a few drift down to your end, passed by a page who looks as if he has considered stealing one and decided against eternal consequences. You receive a single sugared seed. It shines between your fingers, absurdly small. When you place it on your tongue, it melts at the edges before cracking green and sweet beneath your teeth. For something so tiny, it carries remarkable confidence. Some swear sugared seeds after rich food protect the belly from wind, heaviness, and unpleasant dreams. No one can quite agree whether they protect the sleeper or merely protect everyone nearby. You decide that either service is noble. Around you, people begin touching their stomachs discreetly, loosening belts by amounts too small to admit, and praising the feast with voices that now carry the first soft weight of endurance. 6 hours, you remember, is not gluttony alone. It is performance. One must eat, praise, admire, survive, and leave enough room for whatever pride brings next. Talk turns to pilgrim roads. A man with a scallop badge sewn to his cloak tells of shrines where spice merchants kneel beside barefoot penitents, each asking heaven for safe passage. He says there are roadside crosses where travellers leave bent coins, broken beads, or scraps of cloth from sore feet. He once saw a woman rub her swollen ankle with oil blessed near a saint's tomb, then walk 3 more days without complaint. Another guess says the woman probably complained when no one important was listening. This draws a low chuckle, soft as a log settling in the fire. You picture the roads beyond the castle, muddy lanes silvered by moonlight, market towns with shuttered booths, toll collectors warming their hands over charcoal, monks copying accounts by dim lamps, sailors unloading sacks in cold harbours, and horses climbing stony paths with bells on their harness. Every clove, every grain of pepper, every thread of saffron carries these roads into the hall. The noble table seems less like an end point than a meeting place of distant labours. A quiet map laid over bread. The lady of the house lifts her cup, and the candlelight catches her rings. For a moment, the hall appears to revolve around small things: a pinch of spice, a key at a girdle, a wax seal on a merchant's pouch, a salt grain on a fingertip, a sugared seed melting in the mouth. Wealth is not always a chest of coins. Sometimes it is the power to make winter taste briefly of warm coasts and impossible orchards. The brown hound sniffs at your trencher and sneezes at the pepper. You nearly laugh into your cup. Even the hound, bold veteran of feast floors, seems unsure whether distant luxury is edible. Beneath the table, it retreats half a pace, then returns to the safer work of crumbs. The candles have burned lower now, pooling gold along the tables. The rain beyond the shutters softens. The spice dishes are lifted away, leaving their fragrance behind like a story still clinging to the rafters. Your body feels warm, heavy, and strangely travelled, though you have not left the bench. Somewhere past the screen, dice rattle faintly. A minstrel changes tune, and the next part of the night gathers itself among music, games, watchful eyes, and small suspicions. The rattle you heard beyond the screen becomes clearer as the spice-scented dishes disappear into shadow. It is a small, dry sound, quick as teeth chattering in a pouch dice striking wood, bouncing once, then settling into fate, the feast, having travelled through smoke, salt, boar, peacock, and pepper. Now enters that hour when stomachs are warm, cups are easier to lift, and people begin trusting themselves more than they should. Music gathers near the hearth again, and the hall loosens by the width of a belt notch. The minstrel changes to a livelier tune, though still gentle enough to belong to candlelight. His fingers move over the strings with the weary grace of someone who has played for hungry nobles, sleepy children, and possibly one mule with better rhythm than a bishop. A second performer taps a small drum softly against his knee, keeping a pulse beneath the conversation. The singer from earlier hums before finding the words, and her voice rises with a tale of a knight who loses his cloak, his horse, and nearly his dignity to a clever widow at a spring fair. The guests laugh in low ripples, especially those who have never lost anything important except other people's taxes. Near the lower end of the hall, a board is set upon a bench, and gaming bones appear. They are not fine carved ivory, but small polished pieces, pale from use, kept in a leather pouch darkened by many hands. A few men gather around them, shoulders close, cups near their elbows. One tosses, one curses softly, one laughs before he knows whether he has won. Coins are not shown openly at first, because gaming near a noble table must pretend to be harmless amusement until everyone agrees to stop pretending. A merchant places a small token down, a squire answers with a buckle, a household archer offers a knife with a cracked handle, which is accepted only after inspection, because even friendship has standards. Some swear dice are watched by little spirits of luck, and that these spirits prefer clean hands, warm cups, and players who do not boast too early. No one can quite agree whether the spirits punish greed or merely enjoy confusion. One man blows on the dice before throwing them. Another makes the sign of the cross. A third taps the board 3 times with his smallest finger. The monk by the wall notices all of this and says nothing, which somehow feels louder than scolding. You sit where you can see the game without being drawn into it. This is wise. Your purse is thin. Your luck is untested, and the dice look like they have ruined better men in warmer shoes. The brown hound settles beneath the gaming bench, perhaps hoping fortune drops crumbs as well as coins. Its nose rests on its paws, its eyes remain open. The hound, unlike many humans present, knows that watching is cheaper than joining. Court gossip moves through the hall in soft threads. It does not march openly. It leans, whispers, pauses, and hides behind cups. A lady near the middle table remarks that the Lord's cousin has returned from the border looking thinner. Another says thinness is fashionable when a man has debts. A knight claims he has heard that a neighbouring manor court fined 3 villagers for moving boundary stones by moonlight. Someone else says boundary stones move themselves when fields are poorly blessed. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people truly believe such things, or simply prefer a world where stones are easier to blame than neighbours. At your table, an older man with a fur collar tells of a village where the miller keeps a charm under the grinding stone, a scrap of parchment marked with holy words, folded around a hair from a black cat. This, he says, prevents flour from souring and thieves from prospering. The woman across from him snorts and says if charm stopped thieves, every toll collector would be unemployed by Easter. The merchant laughs too loudly, then remembers his own profession lives near that road and becomes interested in his cup. The suspicious monk finally shifts from his seat and comes nearer the lower tables, not with the heavy stride of a man seeking trouble, but with the quiet movement of someone measuring the temperature of souls. His pouch swings at his belt. You glimpse, when his cloak parts, a small wooden case bound with cord, a relic, perhaps, a writing kit, dried fruit. No one can quite agree whether monks carry holiness, paperwork, or snacks, and in this one's case all 3 seem possible. He pauses beside the dice game. The players grow still, though the archer tries to arrange his face into innocence and only reaches indigestion. The monk looks at the board, then at the cups, then at the small pile of tokens. Fortune, he says softly, is a poor landlord. The merchant nods as if this is a proverb he might sell later. The squire, emboldened by ale, asks whether fortune pays rent late. A silence opens. Then the monk smiles, faint as candle smoke, and replies that fortune usually pays in lessons. The players laugh, relieved, and the dice begin again, though now each man throws with slightly more respect for eternity. Around the hall, small defences against envy appear. A lady touches the closed-hand charm at her wrist whenever someone praises her sleeves. A knight turns his ring inward after another man admires the stone. The steward, passing behind the high table, quietly adjusts a candle that has begun to gutter near the salt. Some swear a flame leaning toward a guest means hidden ill will. Others say it means a draught, which is less poetic but often more correct. Still, the steward shields the flame with his palm until it steadies. In a castle, superstition and housekeeping often wear the same cloak. Indigestion, too, gathers its own remedies. Fennel seeds return. A servant brings warm water scented with mint for one elderly guest. Someone produces a little packet of dried rue, bitter and powerful, claiming it wakes the stomach and frightens worms. Another swears by anise, another by walking 3 times around the courtyard before sleep, another by lying on the left side and thinking charitable thoughts. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which cure works best. Perhaps because medieval feasts test the body with the seriousness of a siege. You accept another fennel seed and hold it between your teeth, letting its green sweetness cut through pepper, smoke, and ale. Your body feels pleasantly heavy, though not yet defeated. 6 hours is revealing itself not as one grand act, but as many small survivals. You survive the first hunger. You survive the first cup. You survive rank, sauce, smoke, stories, and the steady pressure to admire dishes before they cool. Noble life from this bench. Seems less like endless pleasure and more like formal endurance wearing clean sleeves. The music softens again. The dice slow. The gossip thins into murmurs. The monk returns to his place by the wall, and for a moment you catch him rubbing his own stomach with a thoughtful, private expression. This comforts you more than any sermon. Outside, rain has stopped, leaving the shutters dark and wet. Inside, the candlelight grows thicker, lower, more golden. Beyond the screen, servants move once more, and a sweeter smell begins rising in the passage. Honey, baked wafers, warm fruit, warm, and spiced wine. The hall, tired but obedient to wonder, prepares to pretend it has room. The sweetness reaches you before the servants do, slipping over the tables in a soft golden drift. Honey comes first, warm and floral, then baked wafers crisping near iron plates, then fruit stewed with spices until it smells like orchards remembering summer. Beneath it all moves the deeper perfume of hippocras, wine warmed and strained through spice, dark with cinnamon, ginger, grains of paradise, and whatever else the steward has allowed the kitchen to measure with trembling care. The hall, which only moments ago seemed ready to sink into benches and dreams, lifts its head again like an old horse hearing oats poured into a trough. Servants appear carrying shallow baskets of wafers, thin and patterned from the irons that pressed them. Some bear little stamped designs, flowers, crosses, leaves, and one that might be a lion if a lion had been flattened by theology. They crack delicately between fingers. At the high table, they are served with careful grace. Lower down, they are passed along in bundles, and you take one that is warm enough to bend slightly before it cools. It tastes of flour, eggs, a little sweetness, and smoke from the hearth. It is not grand in the way the peacock was grand, but after so much heavy food, its lightness feels almost merciful. Near you, the young squire declares he could eat wafers until dawn. His voice is brave, but his face is pale with the realization that dawn may not be as far away as he once believed. The merchant tells him that pride is easiest before the next bite. The squire eats anyway, because youth treats warning as seasoning. Honeyed fruits follow apples softened in syrup, pears cooked until their edges glow, and dried figs swollen with wine. A servant spoons them carefully onto trenchers that have been replaced for the sweeter course. The old bread, soaked with boar, pepper, fish, and ambition, has been taken away, perhaps for servants, hounds, or some fortunate pig whose evening will become legendary. Your new trencher is cleaner, though still stern around the crust, when the honey touches it. The bread drinks again, patient as a field taking rain. You taste a pear first. It is soft, grainy, warm with spice, and sweet enough to make your eyes close for half a breath. In a winter castle, sweetness is not casual. It is stored, guarded, counted, and brought out like a small treasure. Honey comes from bees that must survive cold months in straw hives. Fruit must be dried, packed, watched for mould, and defended from mice, children, and anyone with an optimistic thumb. Sugar, when it appears, has travelled farther than most nights and complains less loudly about lodging. A bowl of sugared nuts arrives near the middle tables and is guarded by social instinct rather than law. Almonds, walnuts, and hazelnuts gleam faintly, some dusted with spice. You receive 2 almonds and a broken walnut piece, which feels like fortune smiling with most of its teeth. Some swear almonds strengthen the heart and sharpen the mind, while walnuts, shaped like little brains, are said by certain healers to aid the head. No one can quite agree whether the shape of a food reveals its healing virtue, or whether people simply enjoy a pattern once they have found it. Still, the walnut is pleasant and your head does not object. The hippocras is poured with ceremony. At the high table, it flows through cloth strainers into polished cups, leaving spices behind like wet brown earth. At your end, a jug comes warm from the sideboard, and the scent rises as it nears you. When your cup is filled, heat seeps through the wood into your hands. You breathe before drinking. The wine is sweet, spiced, and strong enough to remind the body that sleep is approaching by a road with uncertain turns. It warms your throat, then your chest, then your thoughts, which begin moving more slowly, like carts finding mud after rain. Those who can still praise do so. The lady's sweet course is admired. The steward accepts compliments as if each belongs to the household rather than to him personally, though his eyes shine with private victory. The cook does not appear, of course. Cooks are often praised through walls, if at all. Somewhere beyond the screen, the people who made the wafers and stirred the fruit are likely leaning against tables, wiping sweat with sleeves, and hoping the noble guests discover fullness before the kitchen collapses into straw. The hall glows warmer now, not because the fires burn higher, but because the candles have lowered into deeper pools of light. Beeswax gathers along the holders, shadows thicken behind banners, faces soften, even sharp people become rounder near midnight. The seating insult near the salt has lost some of its edge. The lower knight now laughs at something the higher knight says, though no one can quite agree whether this is forgiveness, strategy, or Hippocras doing charitable work. The suspicious monk accepts a small cup of spiced wine after a visible pause, as though negotiating with his conscience. He drinks, blinks once, and murmurs that moderation is a virtue. The merchant replies that warmth is also useful. The monk does not argue. This may be wisdom, or merely the second sip. A servant passes with a little dish of comfits, tiny seeds and spices coated in sugar. They are meant to close the stomach, freshen the breath, and send guests towards sleep with fewer complaints from within. Some swear a few grains of coriander after wine keep bad dreams away, especially dreams of unpaid debts or angry geese. Those who tell the tale never fully agree why geese appear so often in warnings, but anyone who has met one on a narrow path understands the concern. You take a comfit between finger and thumb, it clicks softly against your tooth, then melts into sweetness and spice. Around you, people begin to surrender in small, dignified ways. A lady rests her wrist on the table longer than she means to. A knight rubs his brow. The young squire, conqueror of wafers, stares into his cup as if it contains instructions for remaining upright. Pages yawn behind their hands. One drops a folded towel, retrieves it, and looks deeply offended by gravity. The brown hound has changed tactics. It no longer begs openly. Instead, it lies beneath the table with its nose pointed toward the sweet course, trusting fate, crumbs, and human weakness. A bit of wafer falls near your boot. The hound takes it so softly that you hear nothing but the faintest tick of teeth. It chews once, twice, then sneezes, perhaps offended by cinnamon. You lower your cup to hide a smile. Outside, the night has deepened past rain into stillness. The shutters no longer rattle. The river mist presses against the castle walls, cold and patient. Somewhere beyond the bailey, the broken cartwheel waits by the gatehouse, the rowan sprig tied to its rope dark with damp. Somewhere above, guards stamp their feet on the wall walk and wish noble feasts sent warmth upward more efficiently. Inside, the hall floats in beeswax, wine, honey, and exhaustion. The sweet dishes move away slowly. Not everyone is finished, but everyone has been offered enough to preserve honour. The 6-hour feast is nearing its last long breath, though not yet its end. There are cups to drain, thanks to murmur, crumbs to gather, and the hidden world behind the screen to face the wreckage of splendour. You sit with warm hippocras in your hands, heavy-eyed and strangely peaceful, while the last sweetness clings to your tongue and the rafters hold the fading laughter like smoke. When the last sweet dishes are carried away, the hall does not end at once. It loosens, droops, and glows on, as if the feast has become too heavy to stand but too proud to lie down. Cups remain in hands. A few voices still rise with stubborn cheer. The Lord speaks softly at the high table. The lady's keys rest bright against her gown, and the candles burn low enough that every flame seems to be thinking about sleep. Yet behind the screen passage, where the servants disappear with platters and bowls, the night is only beginning to show its other face. You rise when a maid gestures for help. Your legs protest, not loudly, but with the private honesty of limbs that have sat through too much ceremony. You lift a tray of emptied cups, their rims sticky with hippocras and honeyed breath, and follow her behind the carved wooden screen. At once, the hall changes. The music becomes muffled. The candlelight thins. Warmth remains, but it is broken by draughts slipping through service doors and cracks in the stone. Here, the feast is no longer pageantry. It is weight, grease, crumbs, stains, and aching hands. The passage behind the screen is narrow, dark, and crowded with the wreckage of splendour. Platters lean against walls. Bowls wait in stacks. Cloth stained with sauce are piled in a basket, where a laundry woman eyes them as though they have personally insulted her. The floor is strewn with rushes dragged in from the hall, now crushed under servant boots and darkened by spilled ale. A broken candle lies near the wall, its wick still smoking faintly. Someone steps over it and mutters that a candle snapping during a feast means a secret will come to light. No one can quite agree whether this is an omen or merely what happens when tired boys drop things. You set down the cups near a tub of warm water. 2 scullions are already at work, sleeves soaked to the elbow, scrubbing with sand and cloth. Their faces shine with sweat. One is the onion boy from earlier, now moving more slowly, his hair stuck to his forehead. The other hums under his breath, perhaps a song, perhaps a complaint polished smooth by repetition. In this narrow world, noble laughter becomes dirty cups, peacock becomes bones, boar becomes grease under fingernails, sugar becomes sticky cloth. Glory has to be washed before morning. Leftovers are sorted with surprising care. Fine scraps from the high table are placed in one bowl, lesser scraps in another, bones in a basket, trenchers in a separate pile. Some trenchers, soaked richly with meat juices and wine, will be given as alms, sent to servants, or tossed to dogs. Others are too ruined even for kindness. A grey-haired servant lifts one, sniffs it, and makes a decision with the solemnity of a judge in manor court. Dogs, she says. The brown hound, who has followed you as faithfully as unpaid debt, appears from nowhere and sits very straight. Its timing is suspicious enough to be admired. Near the buttery door, 2 men carry away jugs and count what remains. Ale has been spilled, drunk, praised, hidden, and perhaps stolen in quantities no steward will find restful. One servant wipes a puddle with old rushes. Another sets aside a cracked cup, shaking his head. A cracked drinking vessel, someone says, invites quarrels if kept in use. Some swear that a split cup lets friendship leak out. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this is true. But the cup is removed all the same, in a house full of tired people and sharp knives. No one feels the need to test a proverb. You help carry bones toward the outer service yard, where the cold greets you like a wet hand. The sky above the narrow court is black and low. Smoke from the kitchen vents curls into the mist. Somewhere in the stables, a horse stamps. Farther off, perhaps near the gatehouse, the broken cartwheel still leans in the dark with its rowan charm tied on. You think of the road beyond the castle, quiet now beneath frost and mud, and of all the ordinary household where supper lasted only as long as the pot allowed. Here, 6 hours of noble appetite have made mountains of work. Back inside, the kitchen is dimmer but still alive. The great fires have been banked, their flames lower, their heat deep and red. Pots are dragged aside, grease is scraped, knives are counted, herbs are swept from tables. A cook sits for the first time all evening on a low stool, elbows on knees, staring into nothing with the hollow peace of a soldier after battle. Flour dust marks one sleeve, sauce marks the other. He does not speak, and no one asks him to. There are silences earned honestly, and his is one of them. In a corner, servants eat at last, not ceremonially, not in ranked splendour. They sit on benches, overturned tubs, and steps, taking pieces of bread, scraps of meat, spoonfuls of pottage thickened by waiting. The food is not fresh from its proud entrance, but it is warm enough, rich enough, and taken with the relief of people whose hunger has been postponed by duty. You sit among them for a moment with a heel of bread and a shred of boar dark with sauce. It tastes better here, somehow. Without watching eyes. Maybe food changes when eaten by firelight after labour. Maybe your body is simply grateful to be useful and still. A maid rubs her wrist and says the lady's sleeves were praised 7 times tonight, which means envy will be hovering by the linens. Another tells her to tuck a sprig of rue into the chest and sleep on the left side. Even now, it is hard to tell whether they believe such remedies fully, but the rue is fetched anyway. Small customs are easier than large worries. In medieval houses, charms, herbs, prayers, and habits stitch the night together where certainty leaves gaps. The suspicious monk appears briefly at the passage entrance, his pouch still at his belt, his face softer in the lower light. He thanks the kitchen for the meal. This surprises everyone enough to stop 3 hands at once. Then he adds that he will mention the household in prayer before dawn. The cook nods without rising. The monk's eyes drift toward the leftover trenchers, then toward the servants eating. For a moment, his solemnity seems less suspicious than tired. No one can quite agree whether holiness grows stronger in chapel smoke or kitchen steam, but you suspect it must pass through both. As the hall beyond continues to murmur, the hidden passage fills with small endings. Candles are pinched out, platters are stacked, a girl gathers fall and rushes into her apron. Someone laughs quietly over a dropped almond found under a bench, treating it like buried treasure. The hound receives a bone at last and withdraws into shadow with the dignity of a lord granted land. You stand once more near the screen and look back toward the great hall. From here, the noble feast is only a stripe of golden light, voices blurred, music fading, shadows bending along the wall. From here, you understand the truth beneath the splendour every grand table rests on sore feet, wet sleeves, counted candles, scrubbed trenchers, whispered charms, and people who know exactly how heavy luxury becomes after midnight. You remain by the screen until the golden stripe of the hall grows thinner and softer, not because the candles are gone, but because your eyes have grown used to lower light. The feast does not stop so much as sink into itself. Voices blur, cups are lifted more slowly. Laughter comes late, as if it must travel through wool blankets before reaching the air. The great 6-hour supper, proud and fragrant and exhausting, leaves behind a hall full of people trying to remember whether standing is still possible. One by one, the higher guests withdraw, wrapped again in cloaks, escorted by servants with candles and careful bows. The lord and lady rise last from the dais, and the hall bends toward them like a field under wind. Her keys glimmer once more at her girdle before she vanishes through the private doorway, carrying with her the authority of locked storerooms, folded linens, and spices counted by pinches. The lord pauses to speak to the steward, who nods with the expression of a man already hearing tomorrow's complaints. Then the high table empties, leaving behind crushed rushes, stained cloth, and a silence that feels almost embarrassed by how much it has witnessed. You do not have a chamber. Most people do not. Tonight, like many lesser guests, servants between tasks, travelling men, and those useful enough to be sheltered but not important enough to be private, you settle in the hall itself. Benches are shifted. A few trestle tables are moved aside with tired scraping sounds. Wool blankets are brought from chests, some coarse, some thin, some smelling faintly of cedar, smoke, and previous sleepers. You receive one near the lower wall. Close enough to the hearth for hope, not close enough for comfort. Medieval hospitality, you have learned, often means being grateful for the draught that knows your name. The rushes beneath you are damp in places, though fresh enough to pretend otherwise. You choose a patch that smells more of rosemary than spilled ale and lower yourself carefully. Your bones notice the stone beneath. The warmth of Hippocras fades from your hands, leaving them cold at the fingertips. Around you, others prepare for sleep with small practical rituals. A man removes his boots and stuffs straw inside them to help them dry. A woman wraps her cloak over her head, leaving only her nose visible. The young squire lies down too quickly, groans softly, then adjusts himself with the grave dignity of someone discovering that too many wafers become furniture inside the stomach. Near the hearth, the last large logs have burned down into red caves of ember. A servant banks the fire with ash so it will live until morning. The glow breathes low and steady. It lights the underside of benches, the curve of sleeping dogs, the hem of a cloak, the edge of a dropped spoon missed during cleaning. Half-burned candles remain in a few iron holders along the walls, their flames trimmed small to save wax. One candle gutters near you, leans sideways in the draught, then straightens with admirable stubbornness. Some swear a candle that will not die watches over sleepers. No one can quite agree whether this is blessing beeswax, or a wick too proud to surrender. The brown hound returns with its bone, now polished by dedication. It circles twice beside your blanket, considers your feet, and lies down against them as if granting you warmth from its private estate. Its body is lean but solid, and through your boots you feel a slow animal heat. You decide not to object. The hound sighs, deeply satisfied with the arrangement, and soon begins chasing dream rabbits with tiny movements of its paws. Across the hall, another dog snores with surprising authority. If noble rank continues after sleep, the dogs do not honour it. The suspicious monk settles not far away, seated at first with his back against a pillar. He opens the little wooden case from his pouch, and in the low light you finally glimpse what it holds: not a bone of a saint, not a golden relic, but a small folded cloth, a short prayer strip, and a piece of dried apple. This feels both disappointing and deeply comforting. He eats the apple slowly, then murmurs a prayer too soft for you to hear. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether monks sleep better, because they pray more, or worse, because bells are always waiting to wake them. Tonight, his head dips once, twice, and at last he folds into his cloak like any tired traveller. The hall becomes a landscape of breathing. Here a knight snores in little broken puffs. There a merchant mutters in his sleep, perhaps bargaining with dream toll collectors. Near the lower benches, two servants whisper for a while about linens, spilled sauce, and whether who truly keeps envy from cupboards. Their voices fade, someone coughs, someone turns, wool rustles, rainwater drips from some unseen crack into a basin with a soft, regular note. The sound joins the embers, the snores, the fast stamping of horses, and the river wind pressing against shutters. You lie on your side, blanket pulled to your chin, watching the rafters disappear into darkness. Smoke has stained them through years beyond counting. In the day they may look rough and ordinary, but at night, above the dying feast, they seem like the ribs of an old ship carrying everyone through winter. The smell of the hall settles into layers beeswax, cold ash, damp rushes, ale, wool, dog, and the ghost of cinnamon still clinging faintly after the sweet course. 6 hours of noble appetite now drift overhead as memory bore tusks shining, peacock feathers trembling, sugared seeds melting, dice rattling, the monk's thin smile, the steward's watchful eyes. A bell sounds beyond the river, very late or very early. It is hard to know which. The note arrives faintly through mist and stone, touching the sleepers without waking most of them. You remember the first bell at dusk when you stood mud-footed outside the gate, and the world seemed colder, larger, less forgiving. Now the same sound feels farther away, softened by warmth and exhaustion. Perhaps bells mark holy hours. Perhaps they simply remind the tired body that time continues even when people finally lie still. You close your eyes, but the hall remains behind your lids in low red light. The broken cartwheel waits near the gatehouse. The rowan sprig darkens with damp. The kitchen boys sleep somewhere on straw, arms aching from the spit. The lady's keys hang in some private chamber. The steward's list is folded away. The feast has ended, yet its shape remains in the body, heavy and warm. You breathe slowly. The hound warms your feet. The half-burned candle struggles, glows, and holds all around you. Under banners and soot-black rafters, the castle sleeps uneasily but deeply, wrapped in wool, smoke, and the fading taste of honey. The hall wakes by degrees, not with a trumpet or command, but with the small uneven sounds of bodies returning to themselves. Someone coughs beneath a cloak, someone else groans softly, as if surprised to discover that stone has remained stone all night. The brown hound lifts its head from your boots, blinks at the grey light, and yawns with the wide pink honesty of a creature who has never pretended to enjoy ceremony. Your feet are warmer for its company, though one toe has gone numb beneath the weight of its loyalty. Dawn presses at the shutters in a dull pewter glow. The candles have mostly died. A few stand in hardened pools of wax, bent and shortened after their long watch, while one stubborn flame near the lower wall trembles in its last spoonful of light. The hearth is low, a bed of red ash breathing faintly under a crust of grey. Smoke hangs near the rafters, thinner now, blue in the morning dimness. The banners above do not look proud at this hour. They look tired, as if lions, boars, falcons, and the doubtful bluefish have all spent the night digesting too. You sit up slowly, blanket sliding from your shoulder. The wool has left creases on your cheek and smells of smoke, cedar and a stranger's winter. Around you, sleepers stir. The young squire opens his eyes, immediately closes them again, and places one hand over his stomach in a gesture halfway between prayer and apology. The merchant beside the wall is already awake, counting something inside his sleeve, because trade apparently rises before conscience. The suspicious monk kneels near his pillar, murmuring a dawn prayer so quietly that the words become part of the ashlight. No one can quite agree whether prayers said before breakfast are stronger because the body is humble, or weaker because the body is thinking about bread. Then the bells begin. Across the river, beyond mist and frozen fields, the monastery calls the morning hour. The notes float into the castle pale and thin, touched by distance. Last night they threaded silver through music and spice. Now they pull the household upright. A maid crosses herself without fully waking. A servant boy near the screen passage flinches, then remembers where he is and scrambles to his feet. Bells are not suggestions here. They are the bones of the day. They lift monks from choir stalls, bakers from flour sacks, grooms from straw, and scullions from dreams in which dishes wash themselves. A fantasy too beautiful to be trusted. You fold your blanket as best you can and place it with the others near a chest. The hound follows, stretching each leg with slow ceremony, then shaking itself so hard that a little storm of rush fragments rises around it. Freshness has vanished from the floor. The rushes are flattened, stained, and carrying the full history of the feast ale: ash, crumbs, grease, wet boots, dog hair, and faint sweet spices buried deep beneath the more honest smells of morning. Two women arrive with rakes and baskets, their sleeves tied back, their faces set in the expression of people who have seen noble magnificence and found it sweepable. They begin at the high end. Old rushes scrape across stone, crumbs gather in lines. A lost almond appears near the dais and is pocketed with impressive speed. A spoon is found under a bench. A ribbon is discovered near the hearth, inspected, judged, and tucked away for later gossip. Some swear that whatever is found in the hall after a feast reveals the truth of the night. A coin means luck. A ribbon means secret affection. A broken knife means quarrel. And a chicken bone beneath the high table means the cook served generously. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this is wisdom or simply a way to make cleaning less dull. Behind the screen, the kitchen has already returned to labour. You follow the smell of smoke and stale bread into the passage, where servants move through the grey hour with red eyes and steady hands. The great fires are being coaxed awake. Thin sticks are laid over embers. A boy kneels and blows until sparks brighten and smoke rolls into his face. He coughs, wipes his nose on his sleeve, and continues. No feast, however grand, excuses the morning from arriving hungry. Cold bread waits on a side table cut heels, trenchers saved from the better scraps, coarse loaves from yesterday's baskets. You're given a piece with a smear of hardened fat and a cup of small ale. It is not the honeyed fruit of midnight, nor the proud boar dressed in bay, nor the peacock shimmering beneath candles. It is breakfast as the ordinary world understands it, plain, cool, necessary, and welcome. You bite into it, and your jaw works through the crust while warmth from the rekindled hearth touches your face. There is comfort in food that makes no speech. The cook is already standing, though his eyes look as if they have remained seated. He gives orders in a lower voice than last night, directing a pot of thin pottage, a basket of eggs, and water for washing. Knives are counted again. Missing knives matter. A misplaced blade can mean theft, carelessness, or someone planning badly. One scullion finds a small knife wrapped in a cloth beneath a bench and lifts it as though he has discovered a saint's toe bone. The cook takes it without praise. In kitchens, a survival is often reward enough. Near the outer yard, ash is carried out in wooden buckets. You help with one, feeling its dull heat through the handle. The courtyard lies pale beneath morning mist. Frost silver edges the stones. Horses breathe clouds into the cold while grooms move among them, rubbing flanks, checking hooves, muttering endearments and insults with equal tenderness. The broken cartwheel still leans by the gatehouse, its rowan sprig damp but intact. The carter is already beside it, tying rope, testing the rim, and looking at the sky as if hoping weather may feel shame. It does not. A woman from the laundry passes with stained cloths bundled in both arms. She says vinegar will draw out wine if done early enough, and salt may lift grease if the cloth is not cursed by neglect. Some swear moonlight whitens linen better than sun, especially if spread on grass before dawn. No one can quite agree whether moonlight deserves the credit, or whether cold dew simply does quiet work while everyone sleeps. The laundry woman shrugs at the question. She trusts soaking more than philosophy. Back in the hall, the last guests gather themselves. Cloaks are clasped, belts are tightened, faces attempt dignity after too little sleep and too much hypocras. The steward walks among the remains with his folded list, already restored to vigilance. He notes damaged cups, missing cloth, cracked wax holders, perhaps even moods that may need soothing before departure. The lady's keys are not yet seen, but her authority is everywhere in the open stores, the counted vessels, the swept floor. The bread distributed before the day begins. You stand near the hearth one last time, chewing cold bread while the grey light strengthens over the rush-strewn stones. 6 hours of appetite have become ash, crumbs, stained linen, sleepy servants, and stories already changing shape in the mouths of those who will carry them away. The feast that seemed endless last night now feels fragile, like a dream with grease under its nails. Outside, the road waits in mist. Inside, the castle begins again. You leave the hall as morning finishes, finding its way through the shutters. The hearth behind you is being fed again, not for splendour now, but for the plain work of the day, boiling water, heating pottage, drying damp sleeves, keeping hands from stiffening in the cold. The feast has become labour, and labour has become mourning. You take the last bite of coarse bread, brush crumbs from your cloak, and follow the slow drift of people toward the gate. The castle yard is pale beneath mist. It lies quieter than last night, though not truly quiet. A groom leads a horse across the stones, its hooves striking dull notes in the damp. A maid empties a bucket near the drain. A boy carries ashes in a wooden pail, stepping carefully because warm ash spilled on wet stone makes a paste that clings like guilt. The air smells of smoke, horse breath, cold mud, and the ghost of spices still caught in your wool. Cinnamon and wet sheep are not natural companions, but after a noble feast, they seem to have negotiated a truce. Near the gatehouse, the carter works at his broken wheel. He has tightened the rope around the rim, wedged a splinter of oak into place, and tied the rowan sprig more firmly to the axle. He tells anyone who will listen that the wheel will hold until the next village, provided the road is kind and no ill-wisher looks at it sideways. No one can quite agree whether a bad glance can trouble a cartwheel, but no one volunteers to stare too hard. Medieval life is full of risks already. Insulting a repaired axle before breakfast feels unnecessary. The brown hound follows you as far as the inner arch, then pauses. Its tournier lifts. It looks back toward the kitchen passage, where bones, scraps, and familiar servants promise a better future than muddy roads. You crouch and scratch the rough fur between its ears. It accepts this tribute solemnly. For one brief moment you think it may come with you, loyal companion of feast and frost, witness to boar, peacock, and wafer. Then someone drops a trencher behind the screen, and the hound turns at once, trotting away with the practical heart of a courtier. You cannot blame it. Affection is warm, but gravy is persuasive. At the gate, the watchman from last night stands wrapped in his cloak, lantern no longer needed but still hanging from his hand. His beard is damp with mist, and the iron key at his belt looks heavier in daylight. He nods as you pass. Perhaps he remembers you. Perhaps he remembers the bread baskets. Perhaps he remembers nothing and simply nods because morning is too early for suspicion unless it arrives armed. The little shrine in the niche still holds its painted saint. The candle has burned down to a knob of wax, and beside it someone has left a crust from the feast. Some swear saints favour small offerings more than grand ones, because humility carries farther than silver. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the crust remains, and so does the saint's quiet painted gaze. Beyond the gate, the world opens cold and grey. The moat lies under a skin of mist. The bridge boards are slick beneath your boots. On the far side, the road descends toward the village, passing winter fields where frost silvers the stubble and crews step among the furrows like black-robed judges. You pull your cloak tighter. The noble hall, with its candles and sauces, shrinks behind you stone by stone, while the ordinary world comes forward hedges, ruts, dung heaps, bare orchards, and cottages breathing smoke through low thatch. The road is already busy. A woman drives 2 geese with a switch, though the geese appear to believe they are driving her. A boy leads a cow toward the common pasture, his hands tucked into his sleeves. 2 peasants carry tools toward the demesne fields, mattocks over their shoulders, their faces set for work that does not care who feasted last night. Manor duties do not pause because nobles have admired peacocks. Rent, labour service, carting, ditching, threshing. Mending fences these wait in the morning like patient creditors. You pass a small roadside cross where strips of cloth hang from a thorn bush. Pilgrims and villagers tie them there for fevers, sore joints, lost children, sick cattle, and hopes too private to name. One rag is red, one faded blue, one no more than a thread. Some swear the sickness leaves the body as the cloth rots in the weather. Even now, it is hard to tell whether healing comes from Saint Thorn, time, or the comfort of doing something when worry has no handle. You touch the edge of your cloak as you pass, not tying anything, only acknowledging the quiet human habit of asking the world to be kinder. The village wakes around you. At one cottage, a woman shakes rushes from a doorway, sending yesterday's dirt into the lane. At another, a man repairs a thatch patch with numb fingers. Smoke leaks from roofs and smells of damp wood. Chickens scratch near a midden. A child's laugh rises briefly, then is swallowed by a mother's call. You pass the bakehouse, where heat presses through the wall, and the scent of coarse loaves turns your head despite your full belly. Bread belongs to every rank. You think, it sits beneath sauces in great halls and beside onions in cottages, under roasted boar and under plain cheese, under pride and under hunger. Near the well, women draw water and trade news. Already the feast has changed shape. One says the boar was as large as a pony. Another says the peacock's tail reached the length of a church aisle. A third swears the Lord drank from a cup set with jewels bright as altar lamps. No one can quite agree, and no one seems troubled by that. A feast does not end when the dishes are washed. It continues in telling, growing richer in every mouth that did not have to scrub the pots. You continue along the muddy lane, past the manor court tree where villagers will gather on another day to settle fines. boundaries, grazing rights, and quarrels over pigs with criminal ambition. A reeve speaks with two men near a gate, pointing toward a ditch that needs clearing. His authority is smaller than the Lord's, but nearer, and therefore more difficult to avoid. Behind him, a field lies waiting beneath frost, dull and honest. The 6-hour feast feels distant now, almost impossible, though the smell of cinnamon still clings faintly to your sleeve. The monastery bells ring again across the river, clearer in morning air. You stop for a breath at the bend in the road. Behind you, the castle rises from mist, its towers pale, its banners barely moving. Somewhere inside, servants are still washing, counting, sweeping, storing, mending. Somewhere in the kitchen, the brown hound is probably negotiating with destiny under a table. Ahead, the road darkens with mud between hedges, leading toward fields, shrines, markets, tolls, and the long, slow rhythm of ordinary days. You step forward. The feast remains with you not as fullness now, but as memory beeswax light, wet wool, pepper on the tongue, a half-burned candle, a monk's tired prayer, a dog's warm weight at your feet. The road takes these things gently, mixing them with mist and hoof-prints, until noble splendour and muddy morning become part of the same old world. The road bends away from the village and follows the river for a while, where reeds stand stiff with frost and the water moves under a skin of morning mist. You walk more slowly now, not because the way is steep, but because the night behind you has made the body heavy in that deep, gentle manner of too much warmth, too much food, too many voices, and too little sleep. Your boots sink into the softened track, mud clings, releases, clings again, behind you. The castle becomes a pale shape in the distance, its towers fading into grey like a memory that has not yet decided whether to remain. The monastery bells ring one more time across the fields. Their sound comes clearer now, no longer softened by castle walls and feast smoke. You imagine the monks moving from prayer to work, one to the scriptorium with ink-stained fingers, one to the herb garden to check winter beds, one to the guest house where travellers still sleep under wool blankets and dream of bread. Some swear a bell heard while leaving a place carries a blessing for the road ahead. No one can quite agree whether it blesses the traveller, the road, or the feet that must suffer both, but you let the sound follow you all the same. By midday, the sky has softened to a dull silver, and a weak sun lies somewhere behind it, trying its best with poor materials. You pass a shrine at the meeting of two tracks, a little wooden roof over a painted saint, a bowl for coins, and a string of pilgrim badges nailed to the post. One is shaped like a shell, like the badge you saw near the gatehouse candle. Another shows a tiny key, perhaps for a saint who opens prison doors, locked hearts, or stubborn storehouses. Depending on who is asking, a woman has left a twist of wool there, tied around a thorn. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such offerings are promises, payments, or prayers too small for words. You stop near the shrine because a roadside fire smokes beside it, tended by two travellers and an old man with a cart of firewood. They have gathered windfall branches beneath a hedge and coaxed them into flame. The fire is modest, low and orange, but after hours of cold walking, it seems richer than any gilded peacock. You crouch beside it, holding your hands toward the heat. Your fingers sting as they thaw. Smoke curls into your hood and brings with it the smell of damp bark, ash, and something roasting on a stick that may once have been an onion and now aspires to become supper. The travellers make room without ceremony. One is a pilgrim with patched boots and a badge sewn crookedly to his hat. The other is a wool merchant leading a mule that looks offended by existence. The old man offers you a strip of coarse bread warmed near the embers. It is plain, dark, and a little smoky at the edge. You take it with thanks. After the castle's 6-hour feast, after boar, peacock, honeyed pears, sugared seeds, and hippocras. This bread beside a roadside fire should seem poor. Instead, it feels honest and kind, as if the world has lowered its voice. You sit there for a while, letting the day loosen around you. The pilgrim tells of a ford ahead where stones are slick and one must cross before dusk. The merchant complains about tolls, roads, rain, bishops, mule shoes, and the general dishonesty of puddles. The old man nods at each complaint as though he has heard the same list from every traveller since Charlemagne. Some swear that if you toss a crumb into a fire before eating, you keep hunger from returning too quickly. No one can quite agree whether the fire accepts crumbs as payment, but the old man does it, and after a moment, so do you. The crumb blackens, glows, and vanishes. You think of the castle again, not the grandest part first, strangely, but the smaller things, the row and sprig tied to the broken cartwheel, the maid's red thread on the ladle, the half-burned candle standing stubborn in a draught, the brown hound's warm weight against your boots, the monk eating his dried apple in the dark. The noble feast had seemed like a world made of rank and gold. But now, beside this little fire, it returns to you as a chain of human habits, washing hands, warming fingers, saving wax, cutting bread, tying charms, watching flames, sharing what can be shared. The pilgrim asks whether the feast was as grand as people say. You consider the question while the fire snaps softly. Was the boar enormous? Yes, though perhaps not pony-sized. Was the peacock beautiful? Yes, in a way that felt both majestic and slightly unfair to the bird. Was the sugar white as snow nearly? Did the nobles eat for 6 hours? They did, though by the end, some looked less like lords of the earth and more like travellers, hoping no one would ask them to stand suddenly. You answer simply that it was warm, long, and bright. The pilgrim nods, satisfied. Sometimes plain truth carries farther than embroidered truth, though no minstrel has ever grown rich by trusting that. Afternoon leans toward evening. The road ahead darkens under hedges. The old man loads his remaining sticks. The merchant adjusts the mule's pack. The pilgrim tightens the laces of his patched boots and taps the shrine post twice for luck. You rise slowly, reluctant to leave the fire. Its warmth clings to your palms, then begins to fade as soon as you step away. The small ember bed remains behind you, red beneath ash, quieter than the castle hearth, humbler than the great hall candles, but no less faithful. You walk on as the light thins. Fields open to either side, winter bare and still. Smoke lifts from distant cottages. Somewhere a dog barks, not the brown hound from the castle, but close enough in spirit to make you smile. Your cloak smells of wet wool, beeswax, spice, horse breath, and roadside smoke. The whole journey has gathered in it. The world grows dimmer, and you feel the day settling into its final hush. By the time you find shelter near a small wayside guest house, the first stars have appeared through breaks in the cloud. A low room waits inside, with a rush-strewn floor, a bench near the hearth, and a wool blanket folded with more hope than softness. The fire there is small but steady. You sit before it, watching the last orange light move over your hands. Somewhere beyond the wall, the road lies dark and patient. Somewhere behind you, far beyond fields and mist, the castle hall is being swept again, prepared for another day of rank, hunger, bells, candles, and human wanting. Now the world begins to soften. The crackle of the fire grows slower in your hearing, and the shadows along the wall stretch themselves out like tired cats. You no longer need to hold the whole road in your mind. The mud, the gatehouse, the noble tables, the silver salt, the trembling peacock feathers, the monk's quiet prayer, the hound beneath the bench, the cold bread at dawn, the village well, the roadside shrine, all of it loosens gently, like knots untied by patient fingers. You rest your hands beneath the edge of the blanket. The wool is rough, but it is warm enough. Smoke gathers high above you, not thickly now, only a faint blue veil under the rafters. The fire lowers itself ember by ember. Outside, perhaps frost is forming on the grass. Perhaps a late traveller is still crossing the ford. Perhaps the monastery bells will ring again before morning, but they are far away now, and there is no need to follow them. You breathe in slowly, and the air tastes faintly of ash, old wood, and sleep. The medieval world, with all its mud and hunger and candlelit splendour, does not vanish. It simply grows quiet around you. The road folds into darkness. The castle becomes a warm dot behind your eyes. The feast becomes only a little glow, like honey in memory, like spice fading from the tongue. And you are safe here, near the last warm ember, with nothing more required of you tonight. Let the lords keep their high tables. Let the servants bank their fires. Let the bells measure the hours for someone else. You may sink down now, slowly and softly, while the room dims, the blanket warms, and the old world whispers itself into stillness.